Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com, as well as on Amazon. I have another announcement. Please notify your Attorney General in your state regarding solar panels made by Sonova Generac Systems. If you're having any difficulties with these companies, please notify your Attorney General in your state and fill out the complaint form. I have a return guest. I have Deanna Kloostra on. She was last on season 5, episodes 60 and 201. Now, she has a bachelor's in human services and worked in several behavioral health facilities, also known as group homes. And we're here today to honor Emily Pike and her family and the tragedy that happened out in Arizona. So I welcome you, Deanna.
Thank you for having me on again, Marianne. I always love being on your podcast.
Oh, I'm glad to have you on because we were talking about this when we saw the news, and it's like we had to say something.
Right, right. So, first of all, Marianne, talk about the articles that you found because I've kind of heard about this from different people and stuff. And I also, because I've worked in Arizona before in some of these group homes, I tried
Mhm.
to make contact with some of my former coworkers and a former supervisor. Nobody responded to me. I was trying to figure out if I knew any of the other girls that are missing. And I tried to find out which group home because they're not saying which group home. I have a
Mm-mm.
feeling which one it might be, but I can't confirm that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I
So
have an article by
go
People. Oh, I'm sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
I have an article from People. Mother remembers teenage daughter after her remains are found in Arizona. In quotes, she was just a baby. This was written by Brenton Blanchett on March 2nd, 2025. And then I have the other article, which was As Central, written on March 6th, 2025 by Lauren DeYoung, where it says a 14-year-old disappeared from Mesa. Her body was found near Globe 17 days later. And I'm wondering if there's a connection between Mesa and Globe. If there's something.
They're right next to each other.
Wasn't there something being built in between there? I think I read that in one of the articles that something was being built there. Something.
I'm not sure. One of the things that I had read was her roommate said that she had left to go see a boyfriend. And they
Oh,
think she was walking back to probably the facility and then something pursued. So her arms are missing. So she might have fought back against her attacker and there's DNA under her nails or something. And that's why
mm.
um, they don't have those parts. Yeah. It's just sad. The whole thing. It makes you sick to think about it.
Right, because her mother didn't know she was missing until a week later when the caseworker informed her.
Right, right. So, these kids run away all the time and come back and they make reports and they'll call the police or whatever. And that's kind of just how it goes. I mean, sometimes they don't ever find them, I mean, they found her, but and it takes a chain of command before it finally gets to the CPS worker and they're overworked. So, they're not getting emails and stuff and they get a lot of them. I mean, every time these kids do something, there's a report about it.
Right.
So she was a trouble kid and she was stealing and she would leave and come back an hour later, skip school, whatever. And it's continuing like go on. I mean, it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of people get tired of the paperwork and get tired of reading it. But working in these facilities has just been kind of interesting how they run. And a lot of people don't even know what they're doing.
Right.
And once COVID hit, COVID changed a lot of things and it just really went really crazy after COVID.
Yeah, I bet it did because I bet a lot of things slipped through the cracks.
Mhm. So in 2008, I got my degree and I was put in this program because there were no jobs in Michigan and I had to pay child support.
Ugh.
And I was looking for a job. And it was kind of interesting because this place that I would go to, like you had to be there so many hours. And I could whip out resumes and fax them over and email and do whatever I had to do. And then I had time to kill, so I was helping other people and, I was, whatever. And so one day I had the staff came to me. So basically I just got my degree and actually I could have did their job that they did. So they came over and they said, do you know about this job and this job? And I'm like, yeah, I applied for that. I applied for this. I'm like, do you know about this job, and this job? And they were kind of
Uh-huh.
like, what? So I went to this job at a facility and it was like 4 or 5 hours long. And there was a bunch of people there. So I was on like step three, and this guy came up to me and he says, wow, you guys made it to step three. It's really hard to get here. I'm talking and joking with people because at this time I'm bored out of my mind. It's been like 4 hours. So when I had the interview, he sat in with my interview. He was actually my supervisor's boss.
Mm.
So he sat in on the interview with me. We were talking about kids, and he's like, yep, yep, like she knows about kids, right? I've had three of them. I've done daycare, like stay at home mom.
Hmm.
And so I got hired. I don't think my boss wanted to hire me, but I think she had to because her boss was so impressed with me.
Oh,
So that
right.
kind of created some conflicts with us. So
Oh,
that's how I first got into this system working with this. So it was considered a level 4 facility. So a level 4 facility, everything is locked down. These kids can't get into anything or really have anything. There's 15-minute checks on them every 15 minutes. And when I started, I said I only want to work with the girls.
hmm.
So there was 2 units of girls, 2 units of boys. There were 10 rooms in each. And the kids had their own bedrooms, their own rooms.
Hmm.
Sometimes they did have like two kids in there, but usually it was just one. They had metal doors, cement buildings. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is like these kids have a lot of behaviors, a lot of aggression, and they get therapy once a week, a counseling appointment once a week for an hour. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Hmm.
You know, and then like every day we would have this group and staffs performing this group, but a lot of staffs aren't educated in groups and how to do groups and things like that. So, we would do that with them as well. And I probably was there maybe a month,
Hmm.
and we had all 4 units going off. It was crazy. We sent 4 kids to the emergency room by ambulance. And the kids, when they would get mad, would start slamming the toilet seat lids, right? So there's ceramic toilets, they'd start slamming the lids. Literally, it would crumble the toilet seats,
Oh,
crumble them to tiny little pieces, right? And then they try and pick those pieces up and put them in their mouth. It
oh,
was crazy. I'm gonna tell you what, I've never been in such a violent atmosphere as that day.
wow.
And it was a full moon. So I
Uh-huh.
had worked in the hospital before, and I know that when full moons happen, it's true. When full moons happen, people kind of lose their mind and go crazy. It was a full moon. Later, I ended up talking to a staff that was there. He had been with the company for quite a while, and I said, "Why aren't you guys like double staffing on a full moon? The hospital does. Like, why wouldn't you guys? You're a mental health facility, right?"
Hmm.
After that, they started double staffing on full moons.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Right? It was crazy.
right, right. I worked in a hospital 23 years, and I can tell you full moons were just you dreaded the week before the full moon and the week
Right?
after the full moon.
Right, right. It's just crazy. Yeah, the
Yes.
crazy stuff that goes on. So when I got there, I was told I'd be able to work 40 hours, and I wasn't getting 40 hours in. So I would work, and the staff was working Monday through Friday. So I would do a double on Friday, or I'd work Friday night, I do a double on Saturday and a double on Sunday.
Hmm.
So one time I worked my first shift, and my supervisor comes in and she's like, we're going to move you over to the boys unit. And I looked at her and I said, I told you I did not want to work with the boys. I only wanted to work with the girls.
Hmm.
And she says, I'm really sorry. We're short staffed. We're going to have to move you over there. I'm like, okay, fine. So I'm over there, and, I got a couple male staff with me. It's getting close to bedtime, and all the male staff's going to leave, and I'm going to be left there by myself.
Oh no.
And I said, this isn't going to happen. I'm not going to be in this unit by myself. And so the last guy was there, he was going to leave. And I said, who do I call? And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, when you leave, I'm leaving with you. I said, I will call the police, and the police can come run this unit because I'm not going to be on this floor by
Mm-mm.
myself with these boys. I had two of them that were up, they were just misbehaving. And one was probably just the same size as me. I'm like, it's not happening. So
Mm-mm.
he called his girlfriend, and she said, yeah, go ahead and stay. So he stayed with me.
Mm.
Um, and probably like a week later, one of those boys that were up sexually assaulted a female staff and went to jail.
Ah, see? like when I worked on the psych unit a long time ago, 94, and there was mandatory staffing. If someone called in sick and it was a male, you had to have a male on the floor at all times. So if
Mhm.
Joe called in sick and John had worked his 8 hour shift, he had to stay another 8 hours.
Right,
Ah,
right. So, it was kind of interesting. I was like, woo, I kind of, saved that one. I had another incident with
mhm.
a young lady, and she was just pissed and terrorizing everybody. And she had took crayons and wrote all over the walls. And my supervisor and other supervisors were mad at me. They're like, you didn't restrain her. You didn't stop her from coloring on the
Ah,
wall. So I went back to my trainer, and my trainer said, if you would have restrained her, you would have been fired. They're like, she wasn't doing anything that was that destructive. She wasn't breaking anything. She wasn't harming anybody.
right.
So actually, I did it right. And her punishment was every day for an hour, she'd have to scrub the walls, which I was like, I think that's a pretty good punishment. And what's interesting with this girl is several years later, probably like 10 or 15 years later, I actually seen her. I was talking to her, and she says to me, she says, they took my kids. And I said, yeah, I know. I had met her foster, I think it was her foster mom or something.
Mm.
And she's like, they took my kids. And I said, yeah, I know. And so they harvest off these kids. They keep harvesting off families. They keep taking them. So here's the thing about the kids in this system. I tell them, look, every time you have a behavior, I have to report on it. I have to do a report. And I said, when you get older and something happens and you go into the system, they will pull those reports.
Mhm.
And they're like, no, at 18, my case is sealed. And I said, no, at 18, your case is not sealed. Whoever told you that is giving you wrong information. And I said, do you know what a sealed case is? And they're like, no, what? I said, it's a manila envelope with your documents in it, and it's got like a little string around it. That's what a sealed document is. So when you're a kid and it's sealed, the folder is probably in the judge's folder, but when you age out of the system, it goes into your information. And if somebody goes and pulls it, it's going to be in there.
Mm.
Now, sometimes it will block out names if there's somebody else and it'll have like a black marker in it. You can't see the names of the victim or whatever,
Mhm.
but it's there and they will pull it out and they will use it against you. And these kids don't believe me. And I'm like, I'm trying to help you, but if you don't want to listen to me and there's nothing I can do, go ahead and do whatever you want to do. But I'm just, letting you know
Uh-huh.
it will come back to haunt you.
Yeah. Forewarned is forearmed. I mean, but their brains aren't fully developed.
Right.
They're
Right.
not
They're
gonna.
kids. They want to believe the best, right? What someone tells them.
Oh,
So,
well, even us as
mhm,
adults, we wanted to believe the best when we walked into a family courtroom. Boy, was I fooled.
right. 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 And, so that was a level 4. So my next experience was a level 3. I worked in Tennessee in the middle of the forest. So that was kind of interesting at my interview. My boss was like, well, what makes you think you can run around in the forest, and be in this environment? And I'm like, well, I grew up on a pig farm. And they were
Hmm.
like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was not used to snakes, but now used to those. There were a lot of those, and snakes in the water and poisonous snakes as well, which was crazy. And one of my kids did get bitten by a snake.
Oh,
So they said it was a viper he got bitten by. But it was kind of interesting. I want to say I was there maybe 6 to 8 weeks. And my boss was so verbally abusive, I threatened to quit my job.
oh,
So one of the things that was interesting was I was in training, and when I was in training, there was this older gentleman, and I got to kind of talking to him. Come to find out, he was the program director for years over our campus. And then he quit and doing that, and he moved, and he was like right underneath the owner. And
mm,
I had emailed him what was going on. I didn't know who my director was at the campus. I went right over his head. I just went straight to this guy, right? Not realizing I went over everybody's head and went right down from the second person from the owner. And so he came in and I was in a meeting and we talked. And, I said, I was thinking about it. And I said, maybe I could switch to the other team. And he's like, yeah, I was thinking about that too. So we would always have a meeting before we started. We have to come in like half hour early. We'd have a meeting. We'd then go get the kids from the school, and then we would end up starting our day. Um, so in the meeting, they switched me to the team. As I'm walking out, everybody's saying the supervisor's name. Was it her? Was it her? I'm like, yeah, yeah. Like everybody knew. I didn't even have to say anything. They knew. And it kind of was throughout the whole entire campus. Like I was kind of famous for it. It was kind of weird. But then
Wow.
they tried to write me up,
Uh,
which is kind of interesting. So they wrote me up because they said I was touching the kids. So I was just playing with them, like, they're teenage boys. Anything I would do with my boys, I was
right.
just playing, having fun with them, goofing around with them. And so that's what I got wrote up for.
Uh,
So I started documenting every time somebody touched a kid. The director, I, I had days, I had dates, I had times, and I knew where the cameras were. And so I had a 10-page report and I told my bosses, and it went throughout the entire campus. So they all knew that I was, doing this. So I was in the gym and I went to take a break and I was in the teacher's lounge. They had computers there and I was working on my notes. And the athletic director came in and he says, oh, are you writing about me in your report? And I said, no, but I could if you'd like to be in it. He's like, you're going to try and like shut us down. What are you going to do? And I said, you know what? I just want to do my job and leave. That's all I want to do. And I said, but I'm going to tell you what, I played with bigger fish than you guys, and my ducks are in a row,
mm-hmm.
right? So I already had went through, I already knew who their funders were. I already had them on an email. I already knew how close the owner of the company was with the judge. Yeah, I had all this information. I was ready. I was going to have parents lying down this entire thing, right?
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
is what I was going to do. But they didn't mess with me. They were kosher and they finally let me go ahead and go. Um, they were hurting the kids. So they were putting them in hold. They were hurting the kids, which we're not supposed to do. I had one of my boys, their arm got broken. And I was like, oh man, it was like a lump, right? And I said, did you go to the nurse? And they're like, yeah, the nurse said it was just like pulled muscle.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, I was working like crazy hours and I think I was doing some overnight. So I was like, okay, we work Sunday through Wednesday. And I was like, okay, on Thursday, I'm going to have to call CPS. I'm going to have to report this. Well, on Wednesday, my friend teacher ended up taking him to the emergency room and the principal had broken his arm.
Mm.
We had him at a hold. So that was kind of interesting. And one of the girls who was considered security, her and I did not get along, and because I knew she was hurting these kids. So I was in a hold one time, and she came in and she took over for the other person. We got this kid in a hold. When we're done, he's crying and his arm is red, and he's sitting on the bench, the bleachers, and the nurse comes and is talking to him. And he says she was twisting my arm. So they would take like on the arm, right? And they would take their hands and she was twisting him. So what she would do is she would get him in a hold and she would turn from the camera because she kept pulling me. I was like, why is she pulling me? Like I'm about to fall over. She would turn from the camera and she would twist his arm,
Ah.
is what she did. I was so mad that day. One of my coworker came up to me and I said, look, I'm gonna need a minute. Like just give me a minute because I was irritated. I was so mad. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, how did that nurse not know it? How did that nurse not report it? Right?
Right.
So it was crazy. And they were doing this stuff and the boys would get mad and they would go crazy and they would take over the campus, literally take over the campus. And they would have to call the police to get control of the campus again. I mean, I mean, the violence in these places are absolutely amazing. And when I worked there, one of the things I
Mm-hmm.
realized there was this young kid, he was probably about 10. He was this quiet little thing, right?
Oh.
And he one day was just losing his shit. He was crying. He's like, I don't want to do this shit. I want to go home. He was
Oh.
just crying. And I'm like, I get it, the violence, right? So, back then, if you were a parent and you did marijuana, they would take your kid for that, right?
Hmm.
So this kid is in a calm, quiet environment, and all of a sudden he's in this crazy environment where there's violence going on and kids are doing all this stuff. So one of the things I realized is kids who are like trouble kids, sexually abused kids, um, maybe stolen stuff, beat kids up or whatever, are in the same facility as these kids who CPS has come and taken them out of a home.
Hmm.
So if it's a calm home and it's not domestic violence and it's, parents are doing whatever, um, and all of a sudden they're thrown in this environment with these kids who are aggressive.
Hmm.
That's when I realized that. And I was like, oh my God, they put them all together in the same place. So
That,
that was the hugest thing I learned. And then I tried to get help for these kids and nobody would help me. Nobody would help them.
mm,
But about a year later, they were shut down. So they said they were closing the facility. I have a feeling it was shut down.
well, thank God.
So yeah, it was pretty interesting. And these kids, I literally watched them destroy an entire cabin. And I couldn't get staff to help me to do like a two-person hold. And so I would just sit and I would write at 2:05, so and so broke the door. At 2:15, so and so kicked the door out. At 2, blah 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 blah, whatever. And I would just sit down and write. Everybody knew what happened. So it
Mhm.
was interesting on Wednesday. So I would work Sunday through Wednesday. The other shift would work Wednesday through Saturday. So on Wednesday, we were all together. They could do training and they could do stuff with us on Wednesday. So on Wednesday, we would have these meetings. So we would go with the caseworker and the boys were split up. So the first week we would do like the first 6 boys. The next week we'd do the second 6. We would sit and talk with them. Then we'd have the boys come in. So I would, be talking and I would say, did you read my report? And she'd be like, no. Well, why wouldn't you read my report? I have to write one every day and you're not even reading it. I had a teacher who come in and she says, I love it when you work. She says, I can read your report and I know everything that happened to these kids from the time you picked them up to the time you put them to bed. Everything. She loved it. She thought it was great
Yeah.
when I was working and I was doing my report. And that's how it should be. You should be able to look at this and know exactly what happened throughout the whole entire time that I had these kids with me.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that
Documentation.
was yeah, and I thought this was kind of interesting. Like the supervisor or the caseworker's not reading it, not checking it out. Like, what am
Ah,
I doing it for? So that was kind of interesting. And so I left there. So that was my second experience. And then I became a program director. Well, I became a program director of severely mentally impaired clients.
mhm.
So I worked on level 4, the first thing I did. I worked on level 3. The camp was considered a level 3. And then I don't know if they consider a level 1 or 2, but I was in a program director. But this time I was working with adults. They were severely mentally impaired. And I started out, this is right after COVID, and they don't have any employees. And I am working mad hours.
Mhm.
And I'm salary and I'm on call 24 hours. And I was like, this is crazy. I'm stepping down to be a manager.
Mhm.
So I or supervisor. So I stepped down to be a supervisor. 5 months into this company, come to find out they sold the company. I was so mad. I'm like, I'm just now learning my job. Now my job's gonna all change. If you
Mhm.
would have told me this, I would just like went with a whole different company. But so now this company is gonna buy it out. A lot of staff's going and they can't find staff because they're not paying enough money.
Mhm.
Okay. So they're closing houses left and right. They got to close the houses. They're not making enough money. Then they bring in these temps. Now our staffs are mad because the temps are making more money than they're making,
Oh, yes.
right? But these temps don't care about our clients. They don't have a stake in our clients. They could see
Mhm.
this client today and not see him for another 5 months. So they don't really care. They didn't care about medication. One day someone's like, I've been calling the supervisor and she's not coming to give medication. And I looked at my boss. I said, I've been in a meetings with you all day. My phone is not ringing. She's never called me once. Nobody got medication all day.
Oh,
So I said to my boss, I said, something bad's going to happen. And probably like a month later, I think it was, something bad did happen. And it ended up in court and ended up in a lawsuit, and I am just like, like I tried to tell you people this. So they had wanted me to come back to be a program director. I was kind of burnt out from doing that. They wanted me to go back to be a program director. They couldn't find anybody. So I'm like, fine. They gave me a nice raise. So I went back to being a program director, to the point my boss became an absolutely B.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy. And we're trying to do all these hours. And, you're dealing with the temps were like a whole separate job compared, with the clients, just the things that were going on. And then, they had these crazy websites you would have to go on and double paperwork. And it's two different companies and they were supposed to be combining. And then they said they can't combine them. It was just kind of crazy. So I'm in this meeting one time, like everybody's there, right? The CEO is there. I think it's the second time I've seen the CEO. My boss's boss is talking. And this meeting was kind of ridiculous. And my boss's boss says, we got these forms for medication if they're going on an outing or whatever. So I raised my hand and I said, does everybody have these forms? And she says, yes. This lady says, where are these forms? I don't have them. My head just went bam on the desk, right? And people just started laughing. Like, I just asked this question. Does everybody have it, right? And I said, if this happens, we do this, this, and this. And the like CEO was like, exactly. I think that's what's missing here. You could tell he was furious, right? I was like the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
I get this tap on my shoulder from the guy behind me, and he points to my boss, and I look at my boss, and she's like, no, Deanna, like, no, like, stop, right? And I'm like, really? Like, this is the shit he needs to know. And you want me to stop?
Mm-hmm.
And I just asked, a question, like, does everybody have these forms? Where can they be found? It was kind of funny. I was like the smartest person in that room that day, and he wanted to know what my name was. But of course, they talked so much crap about me. Do you think he ever contacted me or wanted to have a conversation with me?
Mm-hmm.
No, he didn't. It was kind of interesting. So the work got so bad and so horrible. And we were working 80 hours a week, and it started affecting my body. My boss was horrible. And
Mm-hmm.
so the three of us program directors, we just decided to quit. So we got different jobs and we quit.
Wow.
That's how bad it was. And so we had closed a house down, and they had moved a client into the house that I was supervising. And I get this phone call one day, and I said, at 5 o'clock, so-and-so's leaving. And I said, well, okay.
Hmm.
And this is coming from higher up. And they said, if he's not gone by 5 o'clock, you need to call the police. I'm like, okay. So at 5 o'clock, he's not gone. I called the mom, and the mom says, no, I filed a petition. I want him to stay there. And she said, he's been with you guys for 2 years. He was with this other supervisor. And she said, in 2 years, I've not seen any improvement in him. And she says, the little amount of time he's been with you, she said, I have seen so much improvement with him. She's like, nobody has ever had him and asked him to come and sit down at the table to eat with everybody else. He was always outside, always outside, never came in. I was like, why don't you come in, sit down, like eat with us, right? We're going to do group, come in and sit down. And everybody there was like, yeah, come sit with us, come have dinner, right? And, he felt welcome. He felt like, wow, people really want me to come and actually sit down with them. And at that point in time, oh God, I had I think it was 8 and 10 clients. It was just me. And I was literally pulling my hair out. I'm working 16 hours a day, like 5 days a week. I mean, it would just get crazy. Sometimes I'm just like, my supervisor at the time was like, I was worried about you. It's like,
Yeah.
concerned. But, I mean, you've got so much going on and so much that you're doing, and you're trying to just keep up with it all. And, medication and whatever's going on. And now they're trying to throw this client out. And they did. I had to call the police, and the mother had to come and took the client. I was like, what in the world? Like, this is crazy. It was probably the most stressful and crazy environment I've been in. And that was like 2 years ago. And I think I'm still trying to heal from it.
Right.
It was a lot of stress, a lot of, yeah.
So
So I left that. Go ahead.
With the other people that you worked with, did they have bachelors in psychology or human services or early child development, anything? Or were they high school graduates with a 2-year degree?
So I'm trying to think. So um, when I was a program director, my boss, one of the boss at a time, was an older lady. She had been with the company for years, and she had been an ENT. She had been an ambulance driver
Hmm.
years ago. So she did a lot of stuff with medication. If I had a medication issue, I was always calling her like, I need help. I am into holistic healing. I don't know anything about medication.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I would have to tell her like, what is this? What is that? This and that. So I'd always have to call her because I didn't know what the generic name is for it, whatever. And then we got another lady who came in and she had owned a group home for older people. I don't
Mm.
think she had a I don't think she had a degree. Um, when they joined companies, I had another program director, and she did not have a degree. She did not have a high school diploma, but she had worked with the company for several years and had like moved up into the company. They hired another guy who was a former police officer, and I think he was in the process of getting his master's.
Mm.
And then there was another guy they hired who had a master's. Um, but then for like the staff, no, they didn't have anything like that. They didn't have any degrees or anything. They're
Mm.
only getting paid like just above minimum wage.
Oh,
And then COVID hits and the price of apartments and everything goes up, and they got to work 16 hours a days because they can't afford the rent.
right.
They can't afford to live. So yeah, so it was crazy. I one time I had my staff look at me and she says, I'm hungry. Will you go get me McDonald's? I said, yep, text it to me. I'll go get it. I went and got in the car, drove to McDonald's and got it for her. Like, I'm not going to make her beg. I'm not going to have her tell me why. I already know why she can't afford to eat. So
Hmm.
I said, yep, just text it to me. Let me go get it for you. And went
Yeah.
and got her McDonald's. I mean, that's the reality of like what is going on in these homes. And
Mm.
when I first started working for that company, I was impressed. They had like a handbook for everything. It was pretty organized. Um, I was pretty impressed with them. And then when this other company came in, it just went down the tubes. I heard so much bad stuff about this company, and everything they said, it was true. They tried to rebrand themselves with a different name.
Mm.
And here's something interesting. This company had structured their company as a holding company. So they had like a holding company and they're going around, they're buying out all these different group homes. And so they had like their name, right? And then this company would be like an umbrella, this company would be an umbrella. They had all these umbrellas, right?
Hmm.
So when I had time, I'm like, let me look into these holding companies.
Hmm.
So what's interesting with these holding companies is any money that they make go up to the holding company. So it's not in the company, right? And then they are our vans. They didn't purchase our vans. They were rented from like a fleet thing, and they were rented. The houses were rented. So basically, they don't own anything. So if something happens to these clients, they die or whatever, and you go to sue the company, you're not going to get any money. The company doesn't have any. They don't even have any assets. They don't own any of the houses. They don't own any of the vans, any of the vehicles. They literally own nothing. So all you're going to get is some insurance money. That's all you can get.
Wow.
So I think that's why they don't really care if there's temps in there, and I don't think they really care if they're not getting medication or whatever.
So then, the parent really can't sue and get the compensation
These,
they deserve.
right, but these are adults too, so you got to remember that these are adults
Right.
that's in a group home. Yeah, so like they most of them had a guardian, so like their guardian, I mean, they could sue and they could get whatever they're going to get out of, um, the liability insurance. But other than that, you're not getting anything else. They don't have anything,
Well,
you know, and it makes me wonder how much money these people are getting. And so when you got to look into this, and I can't remember the pricing, and I'm sure it's probably all changed since COVID and whatever. But every time we give medication, they get paid for that.
Hmm.
Every time we do a group, which they wanted us to do groups, I think it was 3 times a day, they get paid for that. So if you have 10 clients and you make $100 for doing a group, that's $1,000. That's $3,000 a day that they got just for doing group. If they're getting $100 for medication and we do medication twice a day or 3 times a day or whatever for 10 clients, how much money do you think they're getting?
Yeah.
Then they got food through the state, right? So they got food for the clients paid for. And, they had like a menu that we had to follow and we had to purchase our own food. And it was getting to the point. It was like, we need more money for our food allowance. We're not, COVID, the food prices went up. It's like, we need more money for food. Like what, we can't keep doing this. We got to have more money. And then when the toilet paper shortage came, you know,
Hmm.
I'm like, I got to stack up on this stuff because if something happens, I've got 10 people without toilet paper. You got to
Hmm.
look at that. So when I was a program director and I had like 3 houses, this one I stocked with like toilet paper. This one I stocked, I think it was with coffee. And this one over here I stocked with cleaning supplies.
Yeah.
So I could always switch between the houses if I needed to. And people would call me up, do you got toilet paper? I'm like, yeah, they'd be like different program directors, different houses. Do you got toilet paper? Yeah, I do. Come get some. Right.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I was trying to like certain homes had certain things stocked in them. So if I was out of something, I could get it, or we would have it. I would have it for my home. So, and they're mental patients, so you're gonna
Hmm.
need all that stuff. I mean, I don't know what they do if they didn't have their coffee,
Or their cigarettes. Back in the day,
right?
on our psych unit, we had a smoke room, so they could go in
Mm-hmm.
there and smoke.
So what they did was they decided that the staff needed to light their cigarettes for them.
Mhm.
You don't want to light their cigarettes for them. Most of us didn't even smoke. So
Right.
we don't want them smoking and blowing smoke back in front of our faces. And they're adults. If they're not trustworthy enough to have a lighter, why are they here?
Mhm, mhm.
And then when I was the supervisor, they admitted a gentleman who had handicap issues. Okay. This is not a handicap home.
Mhm.
And then they're blaming me for all the stuff. It's not, I'm like, you admitted him. You put him here knowing this is not a handicap home. He needs these things and you expect me to get it. I'm working 18 hours. I'm working 16 hours a day, 5 days a week, 6 or 8 hours on one day with one day off. And you expect me, I got to go do this and I got to take 10 people if I got to go to the store. I'm like, okay, but what is the person who admitted him? What's the caseworker doing? Why can't they help me out here? And
Mhm.
they hauled me into the office and chewed me out. And I don't want to hear another thing about it, and do you not like this person? I'm like, I like the person. I think he's
Mhm.
great. I'm like, but you have put this extra stress on me when I've already got all these clients and you want me to go buy this stuff, but I can't buy this stuff because you can't just get it at the store. I don't have an Amazon account or whatever, it's eBay account or whatever. I don't have any of that stuff. And the response all came down to me, which I thought was kind of interesting.
And you're like one of the nicest people I know. And,
I,
and,
you
and
know,
then
I
they treat you like that.
no, it's crazy. I was taking notes on the way that they were talking to me and stuff. I was like, this is just absolutely crazy. Um, but then that new company came in and people were leaving left and right, and it just got worse and worse and worse to the point I just couldn't do it anymore. So I took a job as a behavior coach with teenage girls.
Hmm.
Well, I guess it was with kids, but I mostly dealt with teenage girls. So that's one of the first time I was actually in a group home with children.
Hmm.
So most of the children were ward of the state. So, and they had caseworkers, and the staff was absolutely horrible. I couldn't believe the stuff they were doing. So I was taking notes on this staff, like the things that they were doing, what they were doing to these kids. And I sent it to the company. And my company says, we've had several people in there who've noticed the same thing you have, but they've been very emotional about it. They're like, you've been very professional. You've put it in an email. we're going to share it with somebody and see what they suggest. And they suggested that we share it with the owner of the company.
Mhm.
And guess what happened?
Nothing.
Nothing. Nothing happened. Absolutely nothing.
Oh,
So I have this client, and when I got there, I guess she was doing some things, running away, stealing some stuff, whatever. So I get her, I'm working with her, and I'm trying to get, what I would do is I would try and get these kids focused on their future.
mhm.
So I like to do the Briggs and Myers and Briggs test. Have you ever heard of that? It's a personality test,
Mhm.
and it tells you what your strengths and your weaknesses are. And then it would tell you like what jobs you would be good at. This is how I picked the job that I did, how I got my degree. Um, and so this girl wanted to be, I didn't have to do that with her. She wanted to be a fashion designer. She
Mhm.
wanted to work in fashion. I was like, okay, cool. It was kind of towards the end of the school year. And I said, let's look to see if there's some camps. So it was kind of too late, but I tried getting her on some list, right?
Mhm.
So then they're like, oh, the kids are going to go to camp, right? And I said, oh, well, I'm trying to get her into a fashion camp. So I said to her, if something opens up, which one do you want to go to? Do you want to go to the camp with the group home, or do you want to go to the camp, the fashion camp? She says, I want to go to the group home. I want to go with all the girls.
Mhm.
Okay, fine, no problem. Oh my God. Like a week before, they told her she couldn't go. I was like, what? And they were saying because she had gotten some trouble and she had done this and this. Now, she hadn't been in trouble for like a good month, 6 weeks. She's been working with me. She's doing great. We got a resume going. She's applying for jobs. And they tell her, nope, you can't go. So, what do you think happened with that child? She was absolutely furious.
Mhm.
And oh my gosh, that week that they were gone, she was running away, getting the other girls to go with her, going to the store. They were stealing. We called the police. One of the girls got locked into the store. We were calling the police. It was literally maddening.
Why didn't they
And
just let her go? You know?
I mean, she was doing great. But here's the thing, there was another girl who was gotten in trouble, but she got to go, right? And the girl's like, I haven't been in trouble. Well, I had been there. I know she had been in trouble. But one of the staff was like, not not documenting and not getting her in trouble, the ones that she liked or the ones that were her narcs. I later found out she would
Uh-huh.
get the girl, if you tattle on this, I'll take your this away. If you, tattle on this person or find this information out, I'll take this away.
Oh, that's sick.
So it is. It's pretty sickening. Um, it was just horrible. And so then I have a client, I'm working with her. She's got this boyfriend. Everybody's like, ooh, and they're a cute little couple. And I'm listening to it on the phone, and they're just so cute and so
Mhm.
gaga. And one of the girls at the group home gets jealous and starts
Ah,
bullying her at school, bullying her at home. What are the staff doing? Nothing.
nothing.
They're allowing it to happen. So I go above their head and I go to the caseworker, the CPS caseworker, and I let them know what's happening. And she's like, oh my God, nobody's let us know this. I'm like, it's the staff that's doing it. They're not going to tell you, right? Like, I'm trying to tell you. She's like, I have her in trauma therapy. I'm like, I know. And she's like, she can't be bullied while she's in therapy. I was like,
Oh
I
my God.
know, right? So I'm trying to tell this, which they did end up moving her. They ended up not wanting me there anymore. So, I mean, I was creating issues. I knew the truth and I was telling the truth,
Mm-hmm.
and it was upsetting the girls and they would get mad and walk out and leave. And I'm going, wait a second, and it was interesting. I had another staff and the two girls are one's bullying the other one fighting. She's like, oh, they just got to work it out. I
Ah,
was like, what? I'm like, they just got to work it out. So the one girl that kind of went off the deep end, I came in one day to work, and it was during this time that they were all at camp, and they were in trouble. So they said that the staff said they could go walk wherever and do whatever. And the staff said that they didn't say that. Now, I know the staff. I love the staff. This lady was an African lady. She was amazing. I loved her. And I know she would never tell them to do that.
mhm.
So the girl wanted me to take her out. And I'm like, I can't take you out. I had talked with her caseworker. She said, we're going to stop all outings. And this made the girl mad. She's like, no, my caseworker said I could take you out. I'm like, no. She said I couldn't take you out anymore until I could get her approval. And she felt like I was lying to her, and she was mad. She was furious at me. I lied like everybody else, right? Nobody, she can't trust anybody. And I kept trying to get the caseworker there, like, come here, let's have a talk with her, explain to her, right?
Mhm.
I could not get her there. This girl was screaming at me. The staff just sat there and let her scream at me. So one time I kind of hollered back at her, right? And she kind of sat down and was quiet. And I was like, oh, I got a reaction out of her. And I was like, that's how she likes to communicate. Now, when the very first job I had, I took this training that came from out of California. I was taught to CPS workers. It was really expensive. I paid a portion of it, and then the hospital paid a huge portion of it.
Mm.
And I can't remember what it's called. But basically, I was doing that with her. And the staff didn't like it, and they stepped in and they said, we're taking her off your case. I was like, I finally made some headway with her, right? And they're like, we're going to take you off her case. I was like,
Typical.
okay, fine. I know, right? Right. So they finally didn't want me there anymore because I was creating too much issues because I'm like, no, this is the truth. No, you did get in trouble. No, you got, they didn't like that. Plus I was figuring out that the staff was also stealing from the company. So the kids weren't believing the staff anymore. They would come to me.
Mhm.
So I had somebody was coming from my company, and the staff had said, oh, so and so is coming from my company, right? They
Mhm.
come over to me, Dina, is so and so coming? They didn't trust the staff. They're coming and asking me, is somebody from your company coming? Is so and so coming? I'm like, oh, I don't know. I wasn't told that. I can see if I can find out though. And I texted the person to see if they were coming, but they just got to the point where they just didn't trust the staff, period.
Mhm.
And and before I got there, a girl had run away, and they're like, they still haven't found her yet. And they're running away all the time, and you got to call the police, and the police will take a report. There's not really much they can do. A lot of times they come back, they'll be sneaking out a window.
Mhm.
It's just crazy. It is absolutely crazy. So I was what's called a behavior tech. So now what happens if you have a kid that's in school that's having behaviors, they call in a behavior tech. A behavior tech can come and sit right with them at school to make sure they're not having behaviors.
Mhm.
So they're sending these behavior techs now into these group homes as well. Because if you've got, I think that house had 8 kids, you've got 8 kids going off doing whatever. You've got possibly 1 to 2 staff at the time. They're working extra hours because they don't have staff. They've got staff coming from other houses. It's kind of the same thing with the group home. But because I was a group home supervisor, I knew what was supposed to be going on in these group homes and what was supposed to be happening. And, I'm watching all this stuff not happening. I'm watching them not doing this. I'm watching them not follow that protocol. I'm writing it all down, right? I got it all in emails. And nobody did nothing. Absolutely nothing. So this is what's going on in these group homes.
Mhm.
So then so I had a client I met at another group home. Okay. And the workers, like the supervisor was horrible. She was nasty. She was so nasty to me. It was kind of amazing. I called the girl up who had worked with her before. She's like, I didn't have any problems with them. I'm like, this girl is straight up nasty to me. Mean, rude, whatever. So
Mhm.
my client discloses some medical stuff to me, and I'm like, okay. So I call and talk to this lady. I tell her, right, whatever. 4 days later, she still had not taken her to the doctors. That's considered medical neglect. I'm a mandated reporter. I now have to report this. So I report this to CPS, and the next time I come to the house, guess who's there? CPS makes a personal visit, comes, has a discussion, and the supervisor is like, I'm so sorry. I think maybe we got off to a wrong start. Maybe I wasn't communicating as much or whatever, right? It was kind of interesting. She's now all of a sudden backpedaling, right? And I thought it was kind of interesting. So the next time I come back, my client gets upset with me because we can't leave. And her and like another peer are like hitting each other. And I'm like, we don't hit our friends, right? That's not how we treat our friends. And she said, that's how we do it, and got really upset with me. and went to like her room. I was like, okay, fine. So there's this cute little girl there. I sat down, I was talking to her, just kind of playing with her. And the girl got mad because I was playing with this girl. I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like, you're mad, you went off in the room, whatever, and we're about playing with everybody. We walk into a home, we're playing with everybody. They want to come play with us or whatever. If you don't want them, the client doesn't want to play, we can say, sorry, we're just going to play ourselves. We're not in there, just to be mean or whatever.
Mhm.
So she got mad at that. So then I ended up leaving. My session was over with, and they called me and said, we don't feel like she really needs any behavioral help. So we're to take her off your case. Off her case. I was like, really? I was like, well, okay. hmm So here's what's interesting. So that job, like this client went here and this client went to mental hospital and this client this. So I didn't have any clients. They didn't have any clients to give me. So I said, okay. So I started looking for another job.
Mhm.
So I get hired. And so usually there's a company, right? And then they have names for these different houses.
Mhm.
So I get this job. I talk with this lady. I do an interview and she hires me and I'm going to be a crisis supervisor. Okay. So I walk in there the first day. It's like I'm there 15 minutes and they say this girl's name. And I say, oh, I know her. I had her at the other house.
Mhm.
So the one that couldn't go to camp, it was
Oh.
her. And I was like, when she sees me, she's going to lose it.
Mhm.
Not knowing that this business was also the owner of the house where the other girl was at, who was mad at me because she was hitting her friends. I was like, oh, this is going to be just wonderful. So
Mhm.
also I find out within like an hour that the girl that was nasty to me and another girl had been put on suspension because they're under investigation because something.
Oh.
So I'm in there. The girls see me. They're like, oh, her, I can't stand her. Right. I'm worried that they're going to do something to my vehicle because a lot of times
Right.
they'll pop tires with glass. And then after a couple days, they find out that they have to fire these girls because the police showed up. And when the police shows up, it's because probably somebody is going to be arrested. And so these girls were fired. And they had been with the company for like 5 years. And I think she had to restructure her whole company now. And I was taking notes on some of the things that she needed to improve that I was going to talk to her about and we were going to work on. But she never asked me about it even. She says, I just don't think this is working out. I'm going to have to let you go. I was like, okay. She's got her kids working for this company, not doing their job, supervisors not supervising.
Oh.
Um,
Yeah.
it was crazy to see. They would call the supervisor and call the supervisor and call the supervisor. And when they got tired of her not coming, they would go to the ring camera and they would start hitting the ring camera and they would start talking to the supervisor because they figured out she has access to the ring camera and they could see her. Keep hitting the ring camera and like, when are you coming? When are you coming to see us? And she would show up and she would sit and talk with the girls for like 3 hours, laying on the couch with them. I am like, this is not what a supervisor does, first of all. Second of all, the kids shouldn't have your phone number,
Uh-uh.
you know. It was kind of interesting to see. And then they're like, I need you to pass medications. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I was not properly trained on medications. I cannot pass them.
Mhm.
So she sat down with me and trained me on medication. And they didn't really seem to care. Like if a kid didn't get a med or missed to get a med or whatever, they didn't really seem to care. I'm thinking, are you kidding me? At my company, you're getting written up. And if you've had, I think it was 3 of them within 3 months, like you're fired.
Mhm.
And they just didn't really seem to care. Like, oh, well, whatever. If it doesn't get passed, it doesn't get passed. I was like, what, are you like kidding me?
Right.
It was a very interesting environment. And then the girl that kept running away, that was into fashion, they had her there and they had her in a co-ed home. And I'm going, oh my God, you should never put this girl in a co-ed home. So she was caught like going into the boys' room or something. So they moved her to a home with all girls, moved all her stuff, right? Well, then she wasn't getting along with the girls. So they decided to put her back in that home, moved all her stuff back to the home. And I'm just like, but not once did they ever say to me, oh, can we have a conversation about this girl? What do you know about this girl? What can you tell me about this girl? Not one time.
Mm.
Not one time did they have a conversation with me about this. It was interesting to see.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at, and I wouldn't have been able to stay at that business anyways, the way that they were running it. I was just like, what are these people doing? And
Mm.
when I grew up or when I had my kids, I learned about 1, 2, 3 magic. If they implemented that in their group home and every staff learned that, that would be absolutely amazing for their business.
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, just there's other things they could do. And at first, the owner really liked me because I had come up with some really good ideas when I had worked with other clients, when I worked with autistic kids, and when I was at when I worked in the at the camp. I was like the first person to have the boys down at nighttime. And I said to her, I said, you know how I did it? And she's like, no, how? And I said, they like that Axe body spray, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we would have to scan the room. So we'd have to walk into the room, we'd have to hit the scanner, we have to go in every room every 15 minutes. And I said to the boys, I said, all right, I'm going to start my scans. If you are quiet in 15 minutes when I come back around, I will spray your room. Now you've got sometimes 4 boys to a room and it's pretty stinky, right? So when I come, they were like, spray my shirt, right? Spray my
Oh,
shoes, spray this, right? So I would spray for it. By the next time I came around, they're pretty much asleep. So I was like the first person to get my kids down, to sleep. So she really liked some of those ideas, and I was coming up with ideas on things that we could do and stuff. But she never bothered to ask me. She just said, oh, I don't think this is working out. And I was like, yeah, probably isn't. Because if I was to sit down and talk about this stuff and you didn't implement it, I was not going to be able to stay,
right.
and it was just interesting.
What
Like
was
how
that?
how do you run these houses
Yeah.
and you don't understand kids?
Right. And you had these good ideas. What was that 1, 2, 3 magic?
Oh, 1, 2, 3 magic is amazing. So it's my son's teacher actually told me about it. So I had got this book from the library. It was a small book about behaviors or whatever. And my ex and I were married at the time and have him go over and read it. So I was talking about the book one day and he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, oh, you didn't read the book? And he's like, well, no, I just kind of skimmed through it.
Mm.
So we had different parenting styles. So he would spank the child, stand him in the corner, and send him to his room. I'm like, you just punished him 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
I would talk with him, have conversations with him, play a game with him, get mad, and then spank him and send him to his room, right? So I'm like, this isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
So the teacher was like, yeah, yeah. So she's like, we have this 1, 2, 3 magic. They had a book and then they had a video. So we read half the book and we watched the video. So if he didn't read the book, I know he watched the video with me. And then we did the other thing. So we were in the doctor's office one time and I was talking about that. And the doctor says, well, how does that work? And I said, oh my gosh, it's amazing. So my oldest has ADHD. I went from spanking him like every day to hardly ever spanking him at all.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I had my second child, I think maybe he was spanked twice. By the time I had my daughter, she was like never spanked. The stuff
Mm-hmm.
is like amazing, right? And then when I went through my divorce and I was in the front of the court, I actually used it on my ex. So you can use it on abusive men too.
Oh.
It's awesome. So we were in the front of the court and I don't know, he was getting angry and whatever. And I said, that's one. And he was disrespectful to me. And I said, that's two. And he knew at three, I was going to get up and leave.
Mm-hmm.
And, the CPS worker, the caseworker was sitting there looking at me. And I was like, he knew when I got to three, I would leave.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad that you have to do that.
Right.
It's
Right.
almost like their brains are stuck at a 10-year-old.
So true.
Yep. So I've been in mental health for 15 years and I'm like, I can't do it anymore. It's too crazy. They don't have proper staff. They don't have proper
Mhm.
funding. They can't pay you. And I'm like, I can't do it anymore. So I'm out.
Yeah. You get burned out.
Right, right. And this is the craziness that I've dealt with, and not on top of that, when the first business or the first place I worked at that level 4, I got hit in the back of the head. These girls were in a fight and I got hit in like the head or the ear or something. I had like this kind of burning sensation. So the doctor came and looked at me. And then a couple of days later, we had this entire unit going off. We'd have to get in this room and hit this red button, and that would go off everywhere. And anybody who could come would come. And I am hovered over this girl trying to protect her head because these girls are trying to like kick it, right? And I'm trying to like protect her. And the doctor walks in and he looks at me and he says, "You're still here?"
Mm.
And I was like, God, that's a pretty decent sign that somebody really telling me like, I probably should not be here. And then my boss brought me in. This is funny. She said, "You were in the gym barroom dancing with your thong hanging out." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "One of the new staff seen you in the gym with the girls barroom dancing with your thong hanging out." And I said, "Well, have you watched that video? Because I don't wear a thong."
Uh-huh.
And she's like, "Oh," she's like, "I trust my employees." And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "I think it's time for me to go." That was like the
Yeah.
last straw. Like I'm like, and what was interesting too was I had hip issues at that time, and
Hmm.
I didn't disclose that with them that I had those hip issues. There was no way I could have done any of that. And the fact that I don't even have a thong. My boyfriend at the time was like, "Ooh, I want to see this video because I can't get you in a thong, right?" And I was like,
Oh.
"Honey, the video doesn't exist there." And he was like, "Oh, darn."
Oh.
But, and I was like, "I gotta go." And it was interesting because that was in Michigan. And in Michigan, I couldn't seem to keep a job.
Mhm.
I would get like let go for the weirdest and craziest thing. Once I moved out of Michigan, I didn't have a problem keeping a job anymore.
Mhm.
So yeah, how interesting is that?
Yeah.
But when you're exposing stuff, and I had exposed that they were selling the custody of kids, I'm pretty sure they were trying to make it hard on me whenever they found out where I was working, they would do something. So I wouldn't be working anymore.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you start telling the truth, they don't like it. They don't like it.
Mhm. Exactly. And that's why I wrote a book. I actually wrote a book to tell people how to stay safe when you're exposing the corruption. And, people need to have some safety stuff put in place. And
Mhm.
there was a mom who just went to jail. And I'm like, you got to have, I never went to jail. And I think that reason is because I had safety stuff put in place. And one of the things I did was I started a website, and right on my website, it talked about my judge. And if I had court, I would have the date on there. And if it wasn't removed within 24 hours, it's because they put me somewhere.
Mhm.
That's one of the things I did. There's other things that I ended up doing throughout the years. And as things got more crazier, the more safety stuff I had to come up with.
Mhm.
So yeah, if people are going to expose the stuff, you got to put safety stuff in place.
Where can
I don't
people
think people
find
are going
that
to be
book?
upset. Huh?
Where can people find
Oh,
that book?
it's on my website. If you just go to my website, there's a link and it'll take you right to where it's at. I don't sell it on Amazon or anything like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
So
stuff
yeah. So
people need to know. Jeez.
right. If you just look up DK or DK Family Court Coach, the website should pop up. Someone was looking for it and something said something about paying money. You don't have to pay money to be on my website. So I'm sure they're probably trying to block the information.
Hmm.
And then, my thumb drive got taken and then it was returned. So I'm sure the stuff that I'm talking about, they're very interested in it. They want to
Hmm.
know what I'm about. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because I'm so glad we talked about what goes on in these group homes, because what happened to Emily Pike, and then there were like nine more girls they found missing in that wake.
Well, in that group home, there's like 14 other girls, I think it was missing that they haven't found yet.
Hmm.
So, I mean, where they went to, I mean, they could have been taken from a mom and they went back to mom or a different relative or something, and they're
Hmm.
hiding them out. You know, we don't know. Where would they be? Has something bad happened to them, or are they with like a family member? And it's kind of interesting because when I was at the boys' camp and I was talking to the boys, he's like in the middle of the night, they came and picked me up and they said, "Oh, you're going to this camp. It's going to be so much fun, right? You're going to get to go to this camp." Like in the middle of the night, pick them up. Take them to the camp and drop them off. Drop all your stuff off, go into the nurse's office, and they do whatever and get you in there, and there you are. Now you're thrown into a cabin with 8 other kids, and you need to figure out the rules.
Hmm.
And then usually their stuff would come up missing, would end up disappearing. And there was times where, so outside of the cabins, there'd be like a little office and like a little storage room, and their stuff would be in there, or it'd be in like another storage thing, and then they leave and it wouldn't go with them, and they just throw it away. So anything that they would have, and I've heard of kids where they did bring their clothes with them, but they gave them other clothes and the clothes didn't fit them or were too short, too small, whatever, but they got to try and get into them because it's the only clothes that they have.
Oh.
It's sad how they treat these kids and what they do.
Hmm.
And, you got these group homes with staff that are bullies.
And then you wonder why these kids run away.
Right, right. I mean, if you've got all this stuff going on and you got people bullying you and you got staff and yeah, it's just crazy. It's
Hmm.
crazy. So
Right.
no consistency, no really rules. Who cares if anybody breaks the rules? And if you've got a kid having a behavior because the staff is doing what they're doing and they're running away all the time, then that just makes people not want to trust them or what they're saying, believable. Oh, this staff, this, and this, and half of it might be true, but they don't know what the truth is. And then you've got a staff who's reporting it. Oh, so this is the most thing. So after that, in between when I didn't have any clients, my company sent me for training at CPS.
Oh.
I can't remember. I don't know if I still have the information. But the biggest thing, I didn't really learn a whole lot, but the biggest thing I did learn, and I did not know this, if
Mhm.
you have a child who is in custody of CPS and something happens and you need to report, do not report it to CPS. You
Mhm.
have to report it to the state police. I did not know that. So I was talking to CPS workers, telling them what's going on and what I'm seeing, and they're doing nothing about it because you're supposed to be calling the state police, but they don't tell you, oh, you got to call the state police. They don't tell you that. If I wouldn't have took that training, I would not have known that.
That's interesting.
Right.
This
And
way,
so,
yeah.
these, and the thing is, parents can call me, they can have their kids call me and consult with me, and I can talk with them and try and say, look, you're in here. Um, try and, explain to them what's going on, what's happening. And it's kind of interesting because when I first started dealing with parents who were dealing with child protective services, I started noticing that about 6 months, there was something going on at 6 months. And so what I figured it out is they keep telling the kids, oh, you're going to go home, you're going to go home. And at 6 months, that's about the time kids lose their shit. Like, I'm not home. I want to go home. I'm tired of being here. Why can't I go home? Blah, 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 blah. And then what they do is they send them to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist um, will diagnose them with ADHD, whatever they're going to diagnose them with, and put them on medication.
Hmm.
Because when they get that, they're now considered mentally disabled. They can get more money for these kids at that point. So
Oh,
about 6 months, they're like, let's send him to a psychiatrist. Let's get him diagnosed with something, attachment reaction disorder, whatever. Let's put him on medication. And now they're easier to adopt out, or they make more money to adopt them out. And now what they're doing is if you're a foster parent and you have a child that takes medication, now they'll pay you more money for administering the medication.
what a racket.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? It's absolutely crazy.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad.
I've heard, I'm trying to think of where it was. Maybe it was when I was in the camp, but they had CPS workers like didn't have enough people to take these kids, even though they were taking them. And they had kids sleeping in their office. Literally, like they didn't have any place to put them. They were sleeping in their office. I was like, what do you mean? Like, how would you take a kid when you don't even have a place for them to go and have them sleeping in your dang office?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Mhm. Yeah, it's
Wow.
amazing. I don't know. We also had in Michigan, we had this little boy, two little boys were on a playground, and this little boy stabbed the other little boy and ended up killing him, right?
Mhm.
And I am like, I bet you CPS has been in this case, and I bet you the boy was too aggressive, they couldn't adopt him out.
Mm.
Sure enough, that little boy, he had ended up, CPS, and CPS is like, well, we couldn't adopt him out and gave him back to the mom. So if your kids are calm, they're quiet, there's not a lot of issues with them, they haven't been in any trouble, they're easier to adopt out.
Mhm.
People want those kind of kids. If you have a baby, they have now changed the laws. I think it used to be like a year. Now they can adopt a baby out in 6 months because everybody wants a baby.
Mhm.
So yeah, you'll
Right.
have to check up on that one. But I think it's been changed and now it's like 6 months. And they've literally put babies on medication. I know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. And put
Well,
babies on medication.
they get these kids so stressed out and taking them out of, I know there's bad homes, but there's also fit, loving homes that they take them out of to make more
Right.
money. I did a podcast with Jesse Lake called Kidnapped by the Head of State, and that was season 5, episode 241, which was on March 9th. And she had her story to tell about taking her two sets of twins. And, everybody be careful out there.
Right, right. It's crazy. And they love babies. If you've got a 6-month-old baby or a year, couple years old, they love babies because that's what people want is babies.
Mm-hmm.
They can make the money. And then if people don't know, it's Title IV, B as in boy is the funding. If you want to go look it up, Title IV actually is our Social Security. As I keep saying, everybody should be interested in this because
Mm-hmm.
this is our Social Security, and they are depleting our Social Security. They're using our Social Security as kickbacks or um, what do they call that? We call it kickbacks. They call it
Double dipping.
well, a double dipping. We call it double dipping kickbacks. They don't use the word kickback. They use it as an incentive is what
Uh-huh.
they use it. Incentive for government employees. So yeah, so Child Protective Services is getting incentive. Your judge to collect child support is getting an incentive. Um, what is it? PO officers are getting incentives to get criminals back to work. I mean, all this, there's not going to be any money in our Social Security because they're giving all to these government employees
Mhm.
as incentives.
Right. Right. And
And sometimes they can give
Title,
cash incentives too.
right.
Sorry.
Right. And Title 4E is for that foster care. Ugh, it's just so disgusting.
Right. Well, I thought it was Title 4B. Oh, yeah. So Title 4B is for CPS, Title 4E is for foster care, Title 4D is for divorce, which is the child support. Yes.
Right. Right.
hmm
Oh, what a mess. Well,
hmm
I'm glad I had you on, because we wanted to just touch on the Emily Pike case because there's really not a whole lot out on it right now. But when you had said, because you've been my friend for years, and when you said, well,
Right.
you've worked in these group homes, it's like, well, then why don't we just talk about these group homes? And, who knows what she suffered in these group homes?
Right. And my thought process as well was, you've got somebody who's experienced, who's worked in them firsthand, what's happened, because you're not going to hear this from any of the other employees who probably are still in it and don't want to say anything because they'll probably never be able to work in it or lose their job or whatever. And I don't want to go back into the field, so I'm not too worried about it.
Right.
So yeah, so I could just give my experiences, and just know that they keep harvesting. If you've been in the system, right? These kids have been in the system, they become adults, they have kids, they'll just pull that information. Let's just take the kids, harvest off them,
Yes.
right? When those kids have kids, they'll go in and harvest off those kids and just keep harvesting off entire families.
Right. It's like, don't feed the system. Well, what?
Right,
Oh my
right.
goodness.
hmm
Now,
I have a friend who, is consulting me right now about what's going on. I can't believe the stuff she's telling me that's happening with her daughter, and they have not taken these kids. And I'm like, why haven't they taken these kids? Like, I'm racking my brain. Like, this doesn't make any sense why they have not taken these kids. And I said, oh, I know. I know why. I figured it out. So these people in the government can look at your bank account. People don't think that you can. They can. They can look at your bank account. They can see how much money you owe on your mortgage, how much assets you have in your mortgage, and they can say, oh, let's let this continue craziness to go on because eventually the parents are going to want to pay to get custody of the grandchild so the grandchild isn't going through this and this isn't happening and eventually CPS take them. But that's why. They're like, okay, they're like saving out, like let's let brush it under the table, right? Because they're not coming off that money yet. Let's get brush it on the table. And I said to my son, I said, please do not deplete all your assets that you have and money wise so you can pay an attorney so you can fight because in the end they probably are not going to give you your grandbaby anyways,
Right. Correct.
you know, and I just said, please just do not do that. So hopefully it doesn't come to that. I mean, it could, but I hope it doesn't. But yeah, I'm like the stuff I am hearing, I can't even believe
Yep. Yep.
these
Same here.
haven't been
Yep.
real. Hmm.
Now, you're
Yeah,
also on TikTok and people can find you, DK. Is it
family court.
trauma coach?
No, I just put DK Family Court. I kind of shortened it a little bit when I went on
Okay.
social media. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I'm on a new one, Friendly. That one
Okay.
seems to kind of lag a little bit. I'm not really too sure on that one.
Hmm.
But I'm thinking about getting away from Meta because a lot of the stuff I talk about is the torture that they're using and no touch torture, and they don't like the word torture.
Hmm.
So a lot of my stuff is being censored because of that. So yeah,
Well,
I might have to get rid of it.
people need to hear what's really going on. That's why we're here. And I totally
Right.
thank you for your time for coming on and explaining all of this. So sad,
Thank
but
you for having me on, Marianne. I love being here.
I love having you on. We've been friends for, I don't know, 4 years. I don't know how long it's been, but
Right, right. And to all those family members who illegally have their children taken away,
Mhm.
go on social media. There are so many parents out there who are fighting this and going against this as well. To Emily Pike's parents, we are so sorry that you have had to deal with any of this and any of this has had to have happened. Um, and there are other people, I'm sure, in the state of Arizona this has happened to. And please find them and help heal each other.
Yes, thank you so much. Hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gallows, a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you. Deanna Kloostra, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you, Marianne.